to, thank you. Marcy is going to present on the Prager and Telushkin chapter on secular anti-Semitism, the Enlightenment. Todd, is Todd here? Okay, hopefully Todd gets here. And Todd is going to present on the two pieces, The Jew in the Modern World and the Levy, Anti-Semitism in the Modern World. And then Len is going to present on Meyer's chapter in German Jewish History in Modern Times. So, Marcy, are you ready to start?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's see, I'm going to put you here on the screen, Marcy.
Already have it.
Dory already took care of it.
Okay.
Shall I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, all right. So this is from Secular Anti-Semitism, the Enlightenment, and Why the Jews by Dennis Prager and Joseph Telushkin, published in 1983. By the late 18th century, the Enlightenment was challenging the dominance of Christianity in Western Europe, both in its belief in the Bible and in Christian political power. Many Jews welcomed the Enlightenment, expecting secularization to society to improve their status. Looking at France and Germany, and briefly at England, the authors describe the anti-Semitic positions of leading Enlightenment figures, such as Voltaire and Mirabeau in France, and Fichte and d'Holbach in Germany. Voltaire's hatred of Jews impacted later Enlightenment philosophers. While the authors acknowledge that British philosophers such as Locke and Toland called for tolerance and inclusion of Jews in society, most Enlightenment thinkers saw Jews as aliens living outside of society. This led them to a modern form of anti-Semitism that concluded that only Jews who ceased to be Jewish, renouncing Judaism and Jewish laws, could be admitted to this new society. While there was no violence against Jews during the Enlightenment in these three countries, the Enlightenment's opposition to Judaism and Jewish particularism became the philosophic basis for 20th century anti-Semitism, which was strongly based on Christianity, secular humanism, and nationalism. Prager and Telushkin conclude that, quote, by the 20th century, virtually every populist ideology in Europe wanted the Jews, as a distinctive people that preserved its religion, to disappear.
Okay. Thank you, Marcy. Well done. We will distribute a copy of Marcy's summary to everybody. The microphone is as loud as it's gonna, or the speaker is as loud as it can go. So it was a little quiet, but there's no changing that. So thank you, Marcy. Excellent. Let's see, is Todd here? No. Okay, Lynn, would you like to go ahead? You can come on up and you can use the mic here and share your summary. Sure. Okay.
A little long. So this is summarizing German Jewish History in Modern Times, Volume 2, Emancipation and Acculturation. We often hear stories of how, in the years leading up to the Shoah, German Jews considered themselves German first and Jewish second. This didn't happen by accident. Rather, this endpoint was a product of the German Enlightenment and reflective of how Enlightenment thinkers conceived of both the Jews and themselves as moderns. Starting in 1781, with the publication of Wilhelm Dohm's On the Civil Improvement of Jews, German modernizers understood the improved treatment of Jews to be reflective of a general movement towards enlightenment. The problem was they didn't like Jews very much, not even Immanuel Kant, who certainly should have known better. The solution was to work towards the emancipation of the Jews, but to make it dependent on their relinquishing their claims of peoplehood. As freedom of religion was a tenet of human rights, Jews could certainly practice Judaism as a religion, one which modernizers strove to make more modern, assimilated, and deracinated. But in the process, they ceded the cultural trappings of peoplehood to become good Germans. And so nothing bad ever happened to German Jews again. Of course, this isn't true. German anti-Semitism didn't wane, it just changed flavor. And German Jews would learn that only the state could determine what a Jew is.
Great, thank you, Lynn, nicely done. Okay, so we'll distribute copies of Marcy and Lynn's articles, and we'll follow up with Todd to get his as well. All right, so we're talking about the Age of Enlightenment this week and next. What do you know about the Age of Enlightenment? Michael.
Well, they were supposed to play down religion. They were supposed to substitute what they called science for religion. And they believed that things should be judged scientifically. I think it was pointed out by one of the writers that in the conflict between religions, it should be a scientific conflict.
Yeah, okay,
Which relies on the proofs of science and I guess implying won't lead to violence.
okay, all right. So the Age of Enlightenment is an age of reason. Science and reason are emphasized, elevated as kind of the lenses through which to look at the world. And Enlightenment philosophers look negatively upon religion, for sure, including Voltaire, and we're going to read from him in just a minute. All right, when does the Enlightenment take place? Yes, David.
Well, from the late 18th century, I would say through the popular revolutions in the early 19th century.
Okay, okay, all right. Yeah, so the 18th century is into the 19th is really the Age of Enlightenment, but of course, we are all inheritors of the Enlightenment. I mean, we live in a post-Enlightenment world. The Enlightenment was an intellectual, cultural, scientific revolution that took place in Europe and changed the world and changed the way that human beings think and encounter the world and process our experiences. We are all children of the Enlightenment. In other words, we don't know how to look at the world not through the lens of the Enlightenment, because these giants of philosophy taught the world how to think differently. Important concepts introduced in the Enlightenment are the concepts of individuality, human individuality, individual autonomy, personal freedom, equality. Right? These are things that are just part of the world in which we live, but before the Enlightenment, we're not. So you remember when Dr. Gampel was here last week, he talked about the Jews in the Golden Age of Spain, and he said they were happy living as second-class citizens there because, and not even citizens, but as second-class people in the social hierarchy, because it never would have occurred to them that the idea of being equal with the rulers or with the majority. That's a post-Enlightenment idea. Equality didn't exist in the pre-Enlightenment age. Okay, so we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to the Enlightenment thinkers who gave us these concepts that we now take for granted as natural human rights. What was the slogan of the French Revolution? Yeah, liberty, equality, and fraternity, brotherhood. Yeah, liberté, égalité, fraternité. I don't know how to pronounce French, but it's something like that. Okay, so the French Revolution was rooted in Enlightenment philosophy. And of course, overthrew the ancient regime, the old monarchy that was rooted in feudalistic, feudalism, and replaced it with, a lot of chaos, but a newly ordered society that sought to encode these principles of the revolution, liberty, equality, and brotherhood of all. So we're going to learn tonight about France in the time from the Revolution in the late 18th century to the time of Napoleon in the early 19th century. And France in this time is really a very important center of activity. It's the center of the Enlightenment. We're going to see how the Jews fit into this Enlightenment equation, and how some of the key thinkers and leaders in France in this period saw Jews and decided to approach Jews in light of their new principles. And then next week, we're going to look at Germany. Okay. So I want to start by looking at the text that's in your binder. It's the one labeled Unit 4 S3. The cover page is Antisemitism in the Modern World. It's in your binder before the green page. And it's Unit 4 S3, Antisemitism in the Modern World, Richard S. Levy. Okay. This is a kind of a background of the period, and he introduces us to Voltaire, and we're going to read a text of Voltaire about Jews. So this was Todd was going to be presenting on this, but he's not here. Does anybody read this and just want to tell us anything that you took away about Voltaire? Yeah, Michael.
He didn't like Jews.
Okay, that's generally a theme of pretty much every author that's reading in the stores.
He didn't like the particularist aspect of Judaism. He didn't like that they saw themselves as a separate people.
Okay.
And then he gave reasons which I couldn't, it didn't make sense to me.
Okay.
I really.
Okay, all right, good. What else do we know about Voltaire? Just generally, anything about him? Glenn?
Paula has her hand up.
He's like, when you read like in Candide, the chapter about how, the chief priest and the rabbi of Lisbon, they're both sharing Cunegonde. Like neither one of them turns out particularly well.
Okay.
But he did more than other people.
Yeah, okay, so he was a prolific writer, a philosopher, a novelist, a poet, a real, top-notch thinker, and creative, and he's among the most important figures of the Enlightenment. In fact, our authors talk about how the Enlightenment is also, the period of the Enlightenment is also sometimes referred to as the age of Voltaire, or the century of Voltaire, because he's so important. And he dies just shortly before the French Revolution, I think, or right after it, or something, right around there. Paula, you had your hand up?
Yeah, for all his reputation for tolerance, I found it very interesting that he wasn't, particularly as it went towards the Jews and what he said. I was really surprised with this reading, because I always thought of Voltaire in very glorious terms. So it kind of turned my thinking a little bit on its head too. But he wasn't as tolerant as his reputation preceded him. to me.
And so our authors that we read, our authors that we read, talk about that. There seems to be a agreement that, Voltaire's attitude toward Jews, his writings on Jews are somewhat typical of his worldview and his writings in the main, because he was preaching, the Prager and Telushkin on the one hand, and Levy on the other, about, obviously speaking, Jews played in Voltaire's thought. Prager and Telushkin characterize it. He's vehement, and he writes tons about the Jews, and they cast it almost as like a preoccupation of his. Whereas Levy says Voltaire didn't really write that much about the Jews. Looking at his oeuvre, like in total, his writings about the Jews don't comprise all that much of it, but they are virulent, against the Jews. So there's a disagreement there. And both authors mentioned that they referenced scholars of the Enlightenment who, kind of attempt to explain Voltaire's anti-Semitism, some cases dismissively, just kind of saying it wasn't he wasn't really an anti-Semite, or wasn't that much of a big deal, whereas Prager and Telushkin cast it as much more so. So I guess that's something to be resolved maybe through other readings. But in any case, we're going to read something that Voltaire wrote, and you can see from the character of it that his attitude towards Jews is quite hostile. And when we read it, I want to pay attention to, I want us to pay attention to the nature of Voltaire's attitude or view of Jews compared to what we've seen before. Okay? Adam.
Yeah, also, there's the feeling that he attacked Christianity through the Jews. That basically he blamed the ills of Christianity on the Jews.
Right, yeah. So that was one of the explanations. So Prager and Telushkin cited Peter Gay, who's a scholar of the Enlightenment, and that was Gay's argument, is that Voltaire was really sought to attack the church, which he does.
Yes, he does that.
He does that directly, but Gay says that he attacks Judaism as a kind of a surreptitious way, or a substitute for attacking the church. But then they pointed out, but he does plenty of attacking of Christianity directly too. So that may be kind of blunted. And then there was the argument that I think Peter Gay raises also, that Prager and Telushkin cite, that Voltaire may have had some kind of negative encounter with a Jewish financier, but they dismiss it, and Levy dismisses it really as well.
They quote Voltaire as himself dismissed.
Yeah, Voltaire himself dismissed it. Yeah.
And he said something very nasty.
Something very nasty, exactly. So, sometimes, and this is, I think this is, reading this material at this particular moment may resonate in that we all came in, or we came in tonight or to the class, probably most of us thinking about the Enlightenment, like Lori said. Oh, I thought of the Enlightenment as so tolerant and accepting of people and everything. And you think of Voltaire, he's so important. His values are freedom and and equality and all of this. And here I'm seeing something that violates that expectation. So when it's a natural human impulse, I think, when we encounter negative things in people or things generally that we have positive feelings toward, that creates a cognitive dissonance, right? Between we think about the positive things, and then something's challenging that. So, the natural human impulse to cognitive dissonance is to try to get rid of it. And oftentimes we do that by making excuses for it, and say like, well, Voltaire, maybe he wasn't really like that much of an anti-Semite, because that upholds him as a good guy. The thing is, though, that human beings are complicated, you know, and it's very rare, if ever, that any one person or anything is perfectly pure and in alignment with everything that you want it to be. You know, and we're experiencing that, you know, in our own time with, like, you know, all kinds of things go on the news, things that events, people and such that violate expectations. You want to like this one, but then they say things that are horrible. You want to hate this one, but they do things that are good. I mean, but that's the world. That's how people really are, and you just have to kind of deal with that rather than trying to make excuses. But there is definitely a thrust, and these authors pointed out, of you know, a desire to make excuses for Voltaire because he's so important in advancing values that we hold dear. Yeah, Ivan.
You know, something that wasn't discussed, but it brings to my mind is that, you know, Voltaire's view is that we're all equal and you know, everybody should be valued, whatever, but the Jews have always set themselves as different, as the chosen people, and maybe that irked Voltaire's philosophy, that you can't have everybody equal if you have one group that says they're chosen.
Yeah, this is definitely a problem in, you know, in the Enlightenment for Jews, and we'll see it in all of our readings, that this tension between the Enlightenment principles, anyway, in theory, of full equality for everybody. Everybody is an individual equal before the law. Again, that's another principle that we just kind of, you know, take for granted. Like, of course, everyone should be equal before the law, but that's an invention of Enlightenment thinking. Before the Enlightenment, nobody held that everyone was equal before the law. Okay, so you have that, and then
Dr.
we
Karen
have
has her
certain
hand up too.
peculiarities. Okay, thank you. Certain peculiarities about Jews that Enlightenment thinkers and leaders, anyway, perceive to be a problem or a challenge to the values they're trying to advance. And that's really the locus of anti-Semitism in this period. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you. On this theme of cognitive dissonance, how can we find flaws in our idols? I found myself thinking, I wonder if Leonard Bernstein, he called it, when he wrote the brilliant Candide, knew about Voltaire's virulent anti-Semitism. To me, there's no denying that the man was a virulent anti-Semite. But, you know, I mean, Candide was so glorious. And again, that created a mentality of, you know, liberté, égalité, fraternity, except that, you know, Jews are not really part of that. So, I remember my father going through the same kind of mental conflict. He adored Jussi Björling, the Swedish tenor. And when he found out that he was basically a Nazi sympathizer, he couldn't give himself, you know, wrestling with Wagner as, you know, this prototype of Nazi mentality. So that really rang a bell with me.
We're going to read Wagner next week.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to read Wagner next week. Thank you. Len, go ahead, and then we're going to read.
So just a thing about Voltaire.
Yeah.
Is he was a satirist, right? He wasn't writing about Enlightenment values in the straightforward way that like a John Locke is going to be, or like a Thomas Jefferson. He's writing grotesque, right? So in that first production of Candide, the one that was done in the 50s, there was no anti-Semitism because the story was radically changed. But if you look at the version from the late 70s, some of that was put back in. Some of the religious satire was put back in. And I love Voltaire, but I don't think that it is so much of a contradiction to say that he believed in Enlightenment values and also was an anti-Semite. Because he was like, you know, the Linus line about like, I love humanity, it's people I can't stand. That was Voltaire. So he had very high aspirations for what people could be, but he felt that the way that you drive people to be that is by pointing out their lows. So it seems to me very much in keeping with his general attitude.
I see. Okay, good. That's good color. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, so let's read this passage, Voltaire Philosophical Dictionary, section 1, Jews. Okay. It's in the same handout that we were reading. It's just the next page over, page 39. Okay. This is page 39. It says Voltaire Philosophical Dictionary. It is certain that the Jewish nation is the most singular that the world has ever seen. And although in a political view, the most contemptible of all, yet in the eyes of a philosopher, it is on various accounts worth consideration. The Goobers, the Banians, and the Jews are the only nations which exist dispersed, having no alliance with any people, are perpetuated among foreign nations, and continue apart from the rest of the world. But the Jews are dispersed over the whole face of the earth, and if they were assembled, would compose a nation much more numerous than it ever was in the short time that they were masters of Palestine. The learned have agitated the question whether the Jews, like so many other nations, really sacrificed men to the divinity. This is a dispute on words. Those whom the people consecrated to the anathema were not put to death on an altar with religious rites, but they were not the less immolated, without its being permitted to pardon any one of them. Leviticus expressly forbids the redeeming of those who shall have been devoted. Its words are, they shall surely be put to death. By virtue of this law, it was that Yiftach, this is in the book of Judges, devoted and killed his daughter, that Saul would have killed his son, and that the prophet Samuel cut in pieces King Agag, Saul's prisoner. It is quite certain that God is the master of the lives of men, and that it is not for us to examine his laws. We ought to limit ourselves to believing these things and reverencing in silence the designs of God who permitted them. All right, so there's two things in what we read. Focusing on the upper part of this text, the highlighted part. What do you notice about what Voltaire is saying about Jews? What strikes you, Ed?
Well, he's making a distinction, which I think the other authors did as well, about nation versus religion.
Yes,
Which
okay.
I think is very critical in our discussion.
Yes.
And, for me, my understanding.
It is. This is very important. We haven't seen this in our earlier readings. In our earlier in Christianity and Islam, the anti-Semitism was anti-Jew, while religious practice factors in terms of some of the things that he says. He speaks of the Jews as a nation, and this is an important term in the Enlightenment period. Okay, what do you think he means by calling the Jews a nation? Adam?
Well, it's like Trump calling Antifada a nation. It's not really a nation, it's a group of people, you know, who distinguish themselves, but just consider them as not only a nation, but a threat because of their great numbers.
Okay. Okay, well, so what is it? What does nation mean, Dorothy?
Well, I think there's a concept of allegiance.
Uh-huh,
a willingness to follow all the rules
uh-huh,
present that the group accepts as this is our identity.
uh-huh.
So if you're following a subset, your own subset, in the greater context, are you countering the bigger subset?
Yes, that's an issue, absolutely a big one, but what does nation mean? Phil?
It's an independent, basically saying that the Jews are a nation like the United States is a nation. And as a nation, they have allegiance to the nation and not to the place where they disperse.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting there. Yeah, in terms of, the question of loyalty is definitely a big one, but I still want to try to understand better the meaning of the term nation.
And then due to, I should say, legal nation, as opposed to nationalities of people grouped into a political nation.
Uh-huh,
Such as the Bosnians and the Serbians.
okay.
Who subsequently fought for their own.
Okay, so there's an important distinction between a nation and a state. Okay, a state, so like when we said, nation is like the
Yeah, I've let them know their internet connection's been a bit wiggly tonight. And I sent a message to Rabbi, so hopefully he sees it.
How are you?
Doing okay. Yeah, Gail, it's not you, it's them. All of us are
Yeah.
fine. That's how I knew it was their internet at the synagogue because I could see all your videos on. So thank you for having video on. Helps me diagnose.
Yeah, how you doing, Dory?
I'm doing.
Hi, Lords. Yeah, it's nice to see everybody with this. I'm in the process of trying to sign up for the Maimonides one. While I'm sitting here, I'm not having a little too much success with that either just yet. But I want to sign up for the Maimonides one.
Should be
There we go.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still off, and he hasn't seen my message yet. I don't think
It was pretty interesting while I was preparing the summary.
Yeah.
I I went online and I was looking at Voltaire and the Enlightenment and the philosophers, etc., in Wikipedia online, and nobody mentions anti-Semitism anywhere. It's real. It was like it's just not that's not included in any of it.
I think it's such a hot topic right now, Marcy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I think that it becomes, unless it's so blatant that people are saying, hey, this is what's going on, I think
Mm-hmm.
people are trying to put it on the back burner. Although readings certainly related to Voltaire should be able to bring that up. But, yeah,
I'm gonna pull down the share screen because it feels kind of funny leaving it up. There, easier to talk.
I,
Okay, I don't have a phone number for Linda, so I can't. I sent a message to Howard as well. So we'll see if anyone else, I don't know who else was in the room.
I don't know who else either. There was someone named Gail.
Gail's on here.
Oh, okay. Oh, there's Gail. Sorry, Gail.
There's another Gail too. She introduced herself to me last
Uh,
week. Another person called Gail in the class. I didn't know her.
I'm sorry. I didn't see
I
her.
think-
Hi, Nina.
Can I let him know?
Yeah,
Laura's son?
she's in here with us. Or
Right.
did anyone else recognize someone in the room?
Linda.
Dorothy.
Okay, I don't have her phone
Dorothy, how
number, so
about
I can't
Dorothy
text her.
Dorothy Greenberg, Ma'am?
Greenbaum?
Who
I'm
is-
sending something to Linda right now. I have her
Okay.
number.
Hi, Eileen.
Yeah.
Hi.
So any of y'all who have numbers for the others that you mentioned, drop them a line. I've hit Rabbi and Howard so far.
Yeah. But if they're in the class, they won't necessarily be listening for their emails or
Yeah.
texts. Yeah.
Figured
Mhm.
even if it buzzed,
Yeah.
it might be enough. And usually Rabbi has his phone at least
Right. Right.
next to him because I've used it before. I'm gonna try calling, see if it startles him.
Yeah.
There you go.
Video. I just sent a note.
But coming back, we just pointed out how Voltaire, thank you. Voltaire refers to the Jews as a nation, which is an important concept, okay? And it's new, we haven't seen this yet. The war against the Romans was the last struggle of this nation, which has never lifted its head again. Its constant opinion that barrenness is a reproach has preserved it. The Jews have ever considered as their two first duties to get money and children. From this short summary, it results that the Hebrews have ever been vagrants or robbers or slaves or seditious. Okay, vagrants. Jews are wandering the globe because we have no natural place. The Jews are a nation, but there's no natural place in which they dwell. They're just kind of everywhere, wandering the globe. Robbers, slaves, or seditious, or traitors. They are still vagabonds upon the earth and abhorred by men, yet affirming that heaven and earth and all mankind were created for them alone. It is evident from the situation of Judea and the genius of this people that they could not be but continually subjugated. It was surrounded by powerful and warlike nations for which it had an aversion, so that it could neither be in alliance with them nor protected by them. It was impossible for it to maintain itself by its marine, for it soon lost the port, which in Solomon's time it had on the Red Sea. And Solomon himself always employed Tyrians to build and to steer his vessels, as well as to erect his palace and his temple. It is then manifest that the Hebrews had neither trade nor manufactures, and that they could not compose a flourishing people. Right? We saw this before, and we saw it in Luther. When he talked about the Jews are lazy, they don't do anything, they don't contribute anything to the society. And so he goes on this for a while. They never had an army always ready for the field, like the Assyrians, the Medes, the Persians, the Syrians, and the Romans. The labors and artisans took up arms only as occasion required, and consequently could not form well-disciplined troops. Their mountains, or rather their rocks, are neither high enough nor sufficiently contiguous to have afforded an effectual barrier against invasion. The most numerous part of the nation, transported to Babylon, Persia, and to India, or settled in Alexandria, were too much occupied with their traffic and their brokerage to think of war. Their civil government, sometimes republican, sometimes pontifical, sometimes monarchical, and very often reduced to anarchy, seems to have been no better than their military discipline. You ask, what was the philosophy of the Hebrews? The answer will be a very short one. They had none. Their legislator himself does not anywhere speak expressly of the immortality of the soul, nor of the rewards of another life. Josephus and Philo believed the soul to be material. Their doctors admitted corporeal angels. The Jews, in the latter times of their sojourn at Jerusalem, were scrupulously attached to nothing but the ceremonials of their law. The man who had eaten pudding or rabbit would have been stoned, while he who denied the immortality of the soul might be high priest. Okay. In other words, I think the idea is he's saying here is that Jews are not industrious. They contribute nothing. They just they're just obsessed with their rituals of their supposed law, and they're perverse, right? Because they execute people for eating something, but like people who purport, someone who would hold a high level philosophical idea or something. Or would deny an important philosophical idea would become the high priest. Yeah, Dorothy.
They totally ignorant of Jewish intellectual material. Maimonides would never have crossed their lips. I mean,
Yeah,
totally ignorant.
yeah. It seems so. And Voltaire's not the only one to say this. And we're going to read Wagner next time. And he holds similar ideas. It is commonly said that the abhorrence in which Jews held other nations proceeded from their horror of idolatry. Notice, again, picking up this, the Jews keep themselves separate and they hate other people. This was bad. Where did we see this? Do you remember? Yeah, in antiquity, in ancient Greece and Egypt. The Jews hate everyone. They think they're better. Okay. But it is much more likely that the manner in which they at first exterminated some of the tribes of Canaan and the hatred which the neighboring nations conceived for them were the cause of this invincible aversion. As they knew no nations but their neighbors, they thought that in abhorring them, they detested the whole earth and thus accustomed themselves to be enemies of all men. Okay, so you can see how this, Voltaire seeing Jews this way, you can see how it might make him angry in light of his ideals, about equality and brotherhood and so forth. He says, but this nation is weird in that they don't like anybody else. They don't want to be part of other people. They hate everyone. Okay. One proof that this hatred was not caused by the idolatry of the nations is that we find in the history of the Jews that they were very often idolaters. Solomon himself sacrificed to strange gods. After him, we find scarcely any king in the little province of Judah that does not permit the worship of these gods and offer them incense. The province of Israel kept its 2 calves and its sacred groves, or adored other divinities. And he's right about this in the Hebrew Bible. This is an ongoing struggle, in the Hebrew Bible. Idolatry, the people turn against God and chase after other gods, and then, God punishes us, and then we're restored.
He seems to know the Bible very well.
Yeah, probably does. Probably does. Yeah. You then ask whether the ancient philosophers and lawgivers borrowed from the Jews or the Jews from them. We must refer the question to Philo. He owns, and Philo is a Jew who lived in Alexandria, Egypt in the Hellenistic period, who wrote in Greek about he's a Jewish philosopher who wrote in Greek. He owns that before the translation of the Septuagint, that's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, the books of his nation were unknown to strangers. A great people cannot have received their laws and their knowledge from a little people, obscure and enslaved. This people, after their captivity in Babylon, had no other alphabet than the Chaldean. They were not famed for any art, any manufacture whatsoever. And even in the time of Solomon, they were obliged to pay dear for foreign artisans. To say that the Egyptians, the Persians, the Greeks were instructed by the Jews were to say that the Romans learned the arts from the people of Britain. The Jews never were natural philosophers, nor geometricians, nor astronomers. So far were they from having public schools for the instruction of youth that they had not even a term in their language to express such an institution. The people of Peru and Mexico measured their year much better than the Jews. Their stay in Babylon and Alexandria, during which individuals might instruct themselves, formed the people to no art save that of usury. They never knew how to stamp money. In short, we find in them only an ignorant and barbarous people who have long united the most sordid avarice with the most detestable superstition and the most invincible hatred for every people by whom they are tolerated and enriched. Still, we ought not to burn it. Well, thank you. So that's good. That's good. Nikki.
So, according to the authors of the first document, the Jews were only 1% of the population.
Yeah.
So why is he so fixated with the Jews?
That's always the question with anti-Semitism, right? That's always the question. Why are they so fixated? Remember, I mean, back to the first session, we read Sartre, you know, and he talked about anti-Semitism as a passion, you know, like a mental illness, or an obsession that's irrational. And you might see that in Voltaire as well. Although I do think that the way he articulates the character of the Jewish nation as possessing antipathy toward other peoples gives some basis for why he is opposed to Jews, if he's seeking a society that is, you know, fully embracing of everybody. You know, at least I'm sure in his mind that's how he saw it, and that seems to me to be clear from what he says. All right, any reactions to Voltaire? Yeah, Lori.
The idea that in the first paragraph we read where he said the Jews are so numerous, the same trope that we see in the Bible with the pharaohs and later kings, and
right.
So it's sad that it's so repetitive.
It is, yeah. Numerous and just all over the globe, you know? Yeah, Pat.
It seems that this nationhood was the precursor to the world cabal, that we're all scattered, but we all have one purpose, and that purpose is to control others.
Okay, well, so the aspect of nation, or the characterization of nation is important, and it's important not only in the Enlightenment period, but also in the post-Enlightenment period, because it defines the Jewish community on terms that have to do with, remember, like I was saying before, nations are groups of people that share substantive common traits, you know, like common lineage, you know, common language, common descent. You know, a nation has like bonds of ethnicity or something that a religion doesn't necessarily. So in earlier times, you know, Christian anti-Semitism, which is opposed to the Jewish religion, and to the Jewish practices for all the reasons that we learned, doesn't inherently lend itself to attributing characteristics to all Jews, other than that they share a certain set of beliefs. Whereas nation does lend itself to that. Nations are people that have innate characteristics, essential characteristics in common. And when I say essential, I don't mean essential in the sense of important. I mean essential in the sense of essence. You know, like it's part of who you are. So Voltaire is opening the door here to the idea of Jewishness is not just what you believe or how you practice. It's a part of your essence. It's part of who you are. Okay, which of course will take much fuller form later on in Nazism. Who is that back there? Oh, Ben. Yeah, hand up. Go ahead.
The things that he's accusing the Jews of, and he does know his Bible, like he's really thoroughly familiar with it. He's accusing them of things that are really incongruous, like savagery and backwardsness and a lack of philosophy and all these different things. And it seems to me that what he's doing in this age of enlightenment secular period is doing what, you know, Jerome or Augustine does, which is like aligning the Jews with the diametrical opposite of goodness.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So what does he deplore? He deplores brutality. He deplores thoughtlessness. He deplores violence and savagery, because those are the precise opposites of what the Enlightenment Project is trying to move past.
Yeah, good insight. Yeah. So in that sense, and we talked about this before in earlier things that we saw, I think in the Christian section, of the construction of the Jews as like a foil. You know, it's the creation of a character in a story. Just like in the Gospel of John, you know, when he speaks about the Jews. The Jews, yeah, the villain in the story. They're just the antithesis of Jesus, right? It's a literary construction, you know, and maybe to Lynn's point, that's an effect of what Voltaire is doing. The Jew just represents the consummate other, the antithesis of everything that is good. And in that respect, the idea of the Jews hate everybody else fits into that, because it's the opposite of brotherhood, which is the value of the Enlightenment. Susan.
There was something in the passage about you don't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
My dad had a book, and now I have it. It was called When the Jewish People Was Young. Not poor, was young.
Yeah.
And it just looks up, it was written in 34, before the state of Israel. And that has stuck with me, mostly because it's grammatically incorrect, but.
Well, it's not.
But it's not.
Yeah.
I know it's not, because I understand it.
Yeah.
Growing up, I didn't understand it, and as an English teacher, I didn't understand it. But every once in a while, it really hits me. And all of this stuff brought that back to me.
Yeah.
That the Jewish people was young.
Yeah.
We are.
It is an interesting, that grammatical thing, that grammatical feature or peculiarity points to a very kind of, you know, important idea or ideology underlying. So when the Jewish people was young speaks of people as a singular, that the Jews are a collective one. Okay, versus Jewish people in the plural. Jewish people are or were speaks of Jews as individuals. Now, this is very important to what we're getting to next. So thank you for that good segue, Susan. Let's look next, behind your green page, we're gonna look at the text, Unit 4, P1, if it's labeled on that way in your text, it's the French National Assembly. You see at the top, the French National Assembly. So Dory, we're going there. You can put that text down and we're gonna go to the French National Assembly.
It's already up.
First, oh, for some reason I still see Voltaire on the screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, the French National Assembly. So first we just have here just a little excerpt from the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which is the charter document of the French Revolution, or the, you know, the expression of the French Revolution's ideals, essentially its constitution. All right, so it says in Article 1, all men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions cannot be found but on common utility. No person shall be molested for his opinions, even such as are religious, provided that the manifestation of these opinions does not disturb the public order established by the law. Okay, so the basic idea, freedom of religion, every person is equal before the law. It doesn't matter, their religion doesn't matter. There's no right beliefs or wrong beliefs. You know, this revolution was ardently opposed to, you know, the church hierarchy and everything. You know, the French Revolution upended that whole system and establishes something that we would recognize, certainly recognize in our own American Constitution. And in fact, if you look at the note there, underneath it, number 1, let's just read the note. After the fall of the Bastille on July 14th, 1789, a revolutionary National Assembly set out to dismantle France's feudal monarchy and to establish a constitutional democracy. With the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, inspired by the Declaration of Independence of the United States, the National Assembly transcribed the slogan of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity, into law. It became the basic law of the French Constitution. Okay. So now, in light of this, our next text is a transcription of a partial transcription of a debate that was held in the French National Assembly on the question of the Jews. Okay, and it flows from what Voltaire said, not necessarily all of the gross things about Jews being savage and usurers and all that, but specifically the issue of Jews as a nation. Okay, so let's see what the French National Assembly says. All right, so the first speaker, Monsieur the Count of Clermont-Tonnerre. You have, by the Declaration of Rights, secured the rights of men and of citizens. You have irrevocably established the conditions of eligibility for the administrative assemblies. It seemed that there was nothing further to do in this regard. Okay, so just stopping there for a moment, one view to take on the question of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen is to say that it says that everybody is equal before the law, conversation over. Right? I mean, if everybody's equal before the law, everybody's equal before the law. It could just stop there. Why have a conversation about Jews? Aren't Jews people too? Who would that would apply to, and every bit as it would apply to anyone else? Okay, so he says it seemed that there's nothing else to say. One honorable member has, in the meantime, informed us that non-Catholic inhabitants of several parts of the provinces have been seeing their rights challenged by motives drawn from the very laws made in their behalf. Oh, so now there's a religious issue with trying to implement the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Some non-Catholics are complaining that they're not being treated equally. Another has called your attention to citizens who find in their professional obstacle, find in their professions obstacles to their employment of the same rights. I have thus two issues to examine. Exclusion, meaning exclusion from the rights articulated in the Declaration, exclusion related to profession, and exclusion related to religion. I will deal now with religion. You have already addressed this point in stating the Declaration of Rights, that no one shall be persecuted for his religious beliefs. Is it not profound persecution of the citizen to want to deprive him of his dearest right because of his opinions? Now, notice how he's speaking here about religion as consisting of opinions, meaning what you think. That's different from Voltaire. Okay? The law cannot affect the religion of a man. It can take no hold over his soul. It can affect only his actions, and it must protect those actions when they do no harm to society. God wanted us to reach agreement among ourselves on issues of morality, and he has permitted us to make moral laws, but he has given to no one but himself the right to legislate dogmas and to rule over religious conscience. So leave man's conscience free, that sentiments or thoughts guided in one manner or another towards the heavens will not be crimes that society punishes by the loss of social rights. Of course, prior to the French Revolution, you would suffer consequences for not believing in the official religion, which of course we saw in our earlier sessions. Or else create a national religion, arm yourself with a sword, and tear up your Declaration of Rights. But there is justice, there is reason. Every religion must prove but one thing, that it is moral. If there is a religion that commands theft and arson, it is necessary not only to refuse eligibility to those who profess it, but further to outlaw them. This consideration cannot be applied to the Jews. The reproaches that one makes of them are many. The gravest are unjust, the others are merely wrong. Usury, one says, is permitted to them. This assertion is founded on nothing but a false interpretation of a principle of charity and brotherhood, which forbids them to lend an interest among themselves. Men who possess nothing but money cannot live but by making that money valuable. And you have always prevented them from possessing anything else. This people is insatiable, one says. This insatiability, however, is not certain. The Jews is the key statement. The Jews should be denied everything as a nation, but granted everything as individuals. They must be citizens. It is claimed that they do not want to be citizens, that they say this and that they are thus excluded. There cannot be one nation within another nation. It is intolerable that the Jews should become a separate political formation or class in the country. Every one of them must individually become a citizen. If they do not want this, they must inform us, and we shall then be compelled to expel them. The existence of a nation within a nation is unacceptable to our country. The emperor admitted the Jews to all ranks, to all duties. They exercised in France the most important public functions. One of our colleagues has authorized me to say that several Jews contributed to his election. They are admitted to the military corps. When I was chairman, a patriotic gift was brought to me by a Jew, a national soldier. The Jews must be assumed to be citizens as long as it is not proven that they are not citizens, as long as they do not refuse to be citizens. By their petition, they demand to be considered as such. The law must recognize a right that prejudice alone refuses. But one says the law does not rule over prejudice. That was true when the law was the work of one man only. When it is the work of all, that is false. It is necessary to explain oneself clearly on the position of the Jews. For you to keep silent would be the worst of evils. It would be to have seen the good and not to have wanted to do it, to have known the truth and not to have dared speak it. Finally, it would be to place on the same throne prejudice and law, error and reason. Okay, so Count Clermont-Tonnerre. What do you think of him?
Pretty good.
Good guy.
He's good. Why?
He's saying that a lot of the stereotypes about Jews aren't true.
Okay.
Jews are good people.
Okay, he's defending Jews against those kinds of slanders and whatnot.
But he's accusing them of being.
But he doesn't explain about the nation. That part I don't understand.
Okay, well, Dorothy?
In a sense, because they have another loyalty.
Well.
Okay, yeah, he is raising that. With, when he says to the Jews as a nation, nothing. To the Jews as individuals, everything. He is denying the Jews the right to identify as a nation, such as they do. I mean, so is it an accusation of dual loyalty? Well, I guess it kind of is. At least he's saying that if you Jews think of yourselves as a nation, which we don't use the term in our discourse now, but like we use the term people, right? You think of yourselves as like your own distinct people. No, that can't work here, right? And in fact, and if you're not willing to give up on that idea, we're going to expel you from France. Okay, Martha?
I think what he's saying is, we'll accept you as citizens of France.
Yes.
France.
Yes.
But if you go into this like you're a nation, then your history.
That's right. You can't, he says, you can't have a nation within a nation.
Right.
And that idea is the basis for charges of dual loyalty. You know, thinking Jews are a nation within a nation. Where does their loyalty lie? They live here, but they're their own thing.
I'm sure that question is going to be very frequently spoken of in the near future.
Yes, it's a really important question. Yeah, Jerry.
It almost reminds you earlier of when the Christians said you have to be Christian, you can't be Jewish, and if you convert, then it's okay and you can stay. So it's almost like
Yeah, that's right. It is. This is the same thing. It's just conversion to the religion, conventionally speaking. It's essentially conversion to the religion of enlightenment, the religion of reason, equality, liberty, fraternity. This is the creed. We're on board to be French. You can't be some other nation too. That doesn't work here. And if you're going to insist on that, you can't be here. We're going to kick you out. So Clermont-Tonnerre he does seem like he wants the Jews to be citizens, you know, and he's defending them against the accusations, but he is also denying the Jews the right to define themselves perhaps as they want to. Okay, Jane.
They have to define themselves as a nation, other people define
Maybe.
as a nation.
Maybe.
And I think this is a big step forward because other countries didn't allow them to be in their.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And in that book that I mentioned by Noam Pianco, he really does kind of make that case that the concept of the Jews as a nation really more of the product of how non-Jews defined us than how we defined ourselves. But then of course it seeps in. I mean, now, you know, we have Zionism, which is very much, it's a nationalist ideology. right? So, but of course, we become influenced by how other people define this too. In this, we're gonna see when Napoleon asks questions to the Jews, because Napoleon, when he comes along, he wants answers to these questions. Okay, so we're gonna see that, and we'll see how the Jews describe themselves in France at the time. Yeah.
Does France have the equivalent of a Pledge of Allegiance, or how do they define a citizen?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but a citizen, I guess, suppose is someone who
It's not Jewish.
lives in France. No, but he's saying the Jews are eligible for citizenship, but they have to renounce any kind of other national identity. Because you can't have a nation within a nation. All right, now where do these ideas find sympathy in the United States? These ideas about Jews?
The concept of Zionism, yeah.
Not Zionism. The opposite of Zionism. And classical Reform Judaism, which the Declaration of Principles of 1885 of Classical Reform Judaism says, we consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community. Okay, directly influenced by this period of enlightenment. And obviously Germany, 1885 in America, but German, Jews who came over and established and kind of brought Reform Judaism to America, took this out. Being a citizen in the modern age means renouncing claims to nationhood, as Jews. Okay, so let's keep going. Now we have the Monsieur de la Fare, I don't know how to pronounce it, but let's call him de la Fare, Bishop of Nancy. Ooh, Nancy, did you know that you had a bishop? Is the Bishop of Nancy. My arguments and my evidence could not add anything to what Monsieur l'Abbé Moret has said. Now, if you turn, I just circled that, or I noted for myself, footnote 6. Turn to the next page. Let's take a look at footnote 6 at the bottom. Abbé Jean Cephlien Moret, delegate from Perron near Lyon, in opposing an increase of Jewish rights, he argued that by virtue of their religion, the Jews were alien to France, and that moreover, their malevolence was incorrigible. That was this one guy. So he says, I don't have anything. He says, I don't have anything to add to what that guy said. Placed close, so he's opposed to giving Jews citizenship. Placed close to a great number of Jews by the functions with which I am honored, I must present to you my observations of them, and I will limit myself to that. The Jews certainly have grievances which require redress. Rights enacted by this legislature should be revoked without forgetting that the Jews are men and are unhappy. It is necessary to grant them protection, security, liberty, but must one admit into the family a tribe that is a stranger to oneself, that constantly turns its eyes toward another homeland, that aspires to abandon the land that supports it, a tribe that, to be faithful to its law, must forbid to the individuals who constitute it its entrance into armies, the mechanical and the liberal arts, and into the employ of the civil courts and municipalities. A tribe that, in obeying both its own law and the national law, has 108 valueless days in the year. They get a lot of days off, is what he's saying. There's too many days off. But this goes along with the indolence they're like, or they're lazy, they don't contribute. The critique seems to be that this is a group of people that consider someplace else their homeland, and they long for it. It's not just they say, "Oh, I'm from there, but I live here now." They long for it in their prayers and their ideology. They aspire to a return to that land. So he's saying, how do we admit someone, a group, into a tribe, into our family that considers some other place its home? Okay. In all fairness, I must say that the Jews have rendered great service to Lorraine and especially to the city of Nancy, but we are faced with a pressing situation. My evaluation of the situation obliges me to stand against the motion that has been put before you. The interest of the demands this stance. The people detest them. In Alsace, the Jews are often the victims of popular uprisings. In Nancy, 4 months ago, people wanted to pillage their homes. I went to the side of the agitation and I asked what complaint they had to make. Some claimed that the Jews had cornered the wheat market. Others that the Jews banded together too much, that they bought the most beautiful houses, and that soon they would own the whole city. One of the protesters added, "Yes, monsieur, if we were to lose you, we would see a Jew become our bishop. They are so clever at taking possession of everything." A decree that would give the Jews the rights of citizenship could spark an enormous fire. Once they obtained a similar favor from the Parliament of England, but immediately the bakers refused, the Jews very soon demanded the repeal of the bill. I propose to establish a committee which will be charged with the revision of all the legislation concerning the Jews. Okay, so what are your thoughts about this guy?
He's talking about nation, though.
No, he's not.
I mean, he's basically almost agreeing with the first individual, but saying that because it's not a religion, it's nation.
Yeah.
That we cannot accept them.
Right, I think they're in agreement about the Jews as
Right.
nation. It's just that the first guy, Clermont-Tonnerre, says, we want them to be citizens, and in order to do that, they have to give up the idea of nation. This guy is saying, they can't. If we tried it, the French would revolt against it and and kill Jews and whatever. Right? There is, while looking back with the vantage point of our vantage point, I'd say, would Jews want citizenship in these countries? We would probably say, like, of course we would want citizenship, but not all Jews did. Not all Jews supported emancipation because for some of these similar reasons, they wanted to kind of manage their own affairs. They wanted to be out of the sights of angry, nationalists who didn't want them and all of this. So it wasn't universal that all Jews wanted citizenship. Dorothy.
Well, in time, a lot of these things proved to be untrue. I mean, you don't need to read more than the Dreyfus affair for 100 years later to see that Jews did participate in the army.
Yeah.
And they were loyal to France.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
So this really was, this was written out of prejudice.
Okay, yeah, yes, it centers on a character, okay, which is key. Now, let's look for our last text tonight, and then I'm gonna leave you in suspense for next week. Okay, so here, the next text is from 1806, Count Molé, the guy who invented the sauce. Maybe not. But Count Molé So this is now in the time of Napoleon. And Napoleon wants to understand the same kinds of questions that were being raised in the revolution. Napoleon, in establishing his empire and you know, governance of his territories, he wants to understand how the Jews think about themselves. He wants answers to questions. So he appoints Count Molé and several others to convene what they call an assembly of Jewish notables. Okay, so like community leaders from French Jewry to come together and speak on behalf of the Jewish community to the emperor and let him know how they, you know, their stance vis-a-vis these things. So we're going to look tonight at Count Molé's questions, and then next week we'll read the assembly's answers. Okay, so His Majesty, the Emperor and King, having named us commissioners to transact whatever relates to you, has this day sent us to this assembly to acquaint you with his intentions. Called together from the extremities of this vast empire, no one among you is ignorant of the object for which his Majesty has convened this assembly. You know it. The conduct of many among those of your persuasion has excited complaints, which have found their way to the foot of the throne. These complaints were founded on truth, and nevertheless his Majesty has been satisfied with stopping the progress of the evil, and he has wished to hear you on the means of providing a remedy. You will no doubt prove worthy of so tender, so paternal a conduct, and you will feel all the importance of the trust thus reposed in you. Far from considering the government under which you live as a power against which you should be on your guard, you will assist it in all the good it intends. Thus, you will prove that following the example of all Frenchmen, you do not seclude yourselves from the rest of mankind. So you see in there just an acceptance of Voltaire's ideas and others, that the Jews keep themselves separate. They don't want to have anything to do with anybody else. And we're here to have a conversation with you about it and see if that's really your intention. Now, this is how you really see yourselves. The laws which have been imposed on individuals of your religion have been different in the several parts of the world. Often they have been dictated by the interest of the day. See, a key issue here in the topic of nation, or categorizing Jews as a nation, is the fact that Judaism is a religion of law, right? So Jews are subject to a very vast and intricate law. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? Because if this is a nation, what is one thing that a nation has in common? Is a common set of laws that it abides by. And we see that in Judaism, they have these laws. Well, how does that sit? If they're subject to that law, can they be subject to the law of France? Because if they're not, we don't want them, right? That's an understandable question. Any government would want to know that people in their jurisdiction are going to follow their laws, right? Okay, so he goes, the laws which have been imposed on the individuals of your religion have been different in the several parts of the world. Often they have been dictated by the interest of the day. But as an assembly like the present has no precedent in the annals of Christianity, so will you be judged for the first time with justice, and you will see your fate irrevocably fixed by a Christian prince. The wish of his Majesty is that you should be Frenchmen. It remains with you, to accept the proffered title, without forgetting that to prove unworthy of it would be renouncing it altogether. You will hear the questions submitted to you. Your duty is to answer the whole truth on every one of them. Attend and never lose sight of that which we are going to tell you, that when a monarch just, who knows everything, and who punishes or recompenses every action, puts questions to his subjects, these would be equally guilty and blind to their true interests if they disguise the truth in the least. Skipping down, it says, as to us, our most ardent wish is to be able to report to the emperor that among individuals of the Jewish persuasion, he can reckon as many faithful subjects, determined to conform in everything to the laws and to the morality which ought to regulate the conduct of all Frenchmen. Okay, so then they get their instructions. Here's the questions that are asked of them. Is it lawful for Jews to marry more than one wife? Is divorce allowed by the Jewish religion? Is divorce valid when not pronounced by courts of justice and by virtue of laws in contradiction with the French code? Can a Jewess marry a Christian, or a Jew only intermarry among themselves? In the eyes of Jews, are Frenchmen considered as brethren or as strangers? In either case, what conduct does their law prescribe towards Frenchmen? Do the Jews born in France and treated by the law as French citizens consider France as their country? Are they bound to defend it? Are they bound to obey the laws and to follow the directions of the civil code? What kind of police jurisdiction have the rabbis among the Jews? What judicial power do they exercise among them? Are the forms of the elections of the rabbis and their police jurisdiction regulated by the law, or are they only sanctioned by custom? Are there professions from which the Jews are excluded? Does the law forbid the Jews from taking usury from their brethren? Does it forbid or does it allow usury towards strangers? So, what are your reactions to this? Jake?
I mean, I really do. I mean, if you're a member of you live here in the United States, you're subject to their laws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's orthodoxy perhaps that may not, but certainly Reform Judaism or in any Judaism, you actually abide by the state you live in.
Yeah, and that's already a Talmudic principle. The Talmudic principle is Dina de Malchuta Dina, which means the law of the kingdom is the law. Okay, so already in the Talmudic period, the sages had well established that you have to follow the law of the country. Now, the fact that Napoleon's representatives asked that question indicates that they don't know that or they don't believe it, right? So you see embedded in these questions an innate suspicion of Jews. You know, we're not sure about these guys. Like we would be happy for them to be part of our community, of our country, but we're not sure what they think about us and our laws, right? We have reason to distrust them. Okay, Michael?
Well, it's sort of, they're saying, do you believe you can have more than one wife?
Yeah.
Which implying that the French law is against them.
For sure, yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, the French law would be against that, and so they would want to know it. And again, they would be thinking that maybe Jews could have polygamy. Now, the truth is that for Jews in France, Ashkenazi Jews at this time were already in halacha in the 10th century or 11th. The 10th or 11th century, polygamy had already been outlawed in halacha. But again, they don't know that.
also, when they say you rabbis make law for you, they're implying, would they make laws that contradict our law?
Right, yeah. Okay, so when they ask about jurisdiction, like you have these rabbis. Now, they're asking these questions, not because, and you have to understand, like, what the French are looking at, are not, a Jewish community that looks and behaves like Temple Beth-El of Great Neck. Okay? They are, you know, this is a time when, up to the time of the French Revolution, you know, Jews, we've learned about this, Jews lived in the various countries where they dwelled as guests of the king, and they were a corporate entity, not a, you know, 501, whatever, but like a single entity that was self-governing. Jewish community, the only thing that the king cared about was that they paid their taxes to the king. But the Jews governed themselves, you know, and they have rabbis and so forth that adjudicated cases and made rules for the community and enforced it. The rabbis did have police powers. We don't have that, right? You don't want to, if you don't want to keep kosher or you don't want to come to Shabbat, there's nothing I can do about that. But back in the day, the rabbis did have police powers. Okay, so this is now in the dawn of a new world order, a new way of operating. And this is what they know about Jews. That in France, it used to be that Jews would live there and they did their own thing. You know, they lived by their own laws. And they have these leaders that enforce it. Now, is that what you're expecting from living in Napoleon's empire? We don't really know. Okay, Dorothy.
Yeah, but the question that strikes me is, are there professions from which the Jews are excluded by their law?
For sure. Yeah. Of course, there are professions that our law halakha excludes us from, which the halakha considers to be unsavory. But yes, and Claremont-Tonnerre noted that. He said, like, the Jews, they make their money through lending, you know, money, but that's all they've been allowed to do. Okay, so this is the Jews coming under the auspices of an entirely new form of government and an entirely new intellectual, political, cultural world. And they don't know what to do with Jews. Right? So they're trying to figure it out, and they bring with them certain assumptions that were learned from before. And from Enlightenment philosophers, which, like Voltaire, condemned Jews for clannishness and chauvinism and, you know, all those kinds of things, and compounded on heritage. You know, so there's a lot to overcome. We'll take Eric, and then we're going to end.
It sounds like an idiotic question, but were there never any societies that had loans that had interest?
Say again?
Is it only Jews that lent money with interest?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's like, there may be some dissonance between what the official law was and what happened in actual practice. You know, like when we saw Lacia and Partidas, it said all these things, but they didn't really implement it. But under Christian doctrine, the Christians could not lend to each other at interest. So that's why the kings like utilized the Jews to do it. Now, were there Christian bankers too doing that? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to stop here, and next week we're going to pick up by looking at the answers that they give to Napoleon, and then we're going to migrate over to Germany and read the Germans in this time period. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.